D-Day Normandy invasion, and also to Ireland, where as you'll learn a little bit more about the pub and the trip to Ireland, that was a pretty neat trip for him, going in, meeting his ancestral homeland. 1985, probably the most important trip there was going to Geneva and the very first summit with President Gorbachev. 1986, brought him to two very different climates, I always like to mention. He went to the beautiful Caribbean island of Grenada, where he spoke about freedom and democracy, and then traveled to Reykjavik, Iceland, where he had his second meeting with Gorbachev. Came in with lots of optimism and smiles, and walked out of there with quite a bit of frustration and frowns. 1987, brought him to Berlin, Germany, where he made the very famous speech asking President Gorbachev to tear down that wall. Probably one of his most impressive and famous speeches. 1988 brought a lot of last UN General Assembly speaking, last economic summit in Toronto. I also brought him traveling 6,000 miles to campaign for George H.W. Bush to run for president, and then also brought him to the Reagan Library for the groundbreaking ceremony of the library being built. And in 1989, the very last trip he took on this plane brought him home to his beloved California, and it was no longer Air Force One because he was no longer president. George H.W. Bush was already inaugurated, so then it was Special Air Mission 27,000. You could talk to kids about this map. I'd certainly never spend any time with adults over here, but it is kind of fun to point out the circle, ask them what is that in the circle, and unfortunately they don't always know that it's Washington, D.C. And then just the different areas that he traveled, they kind of get a kick out of that. Sometimes if I have time, because with kids I don't oftentimes have a lot of time to spend over here, I'll ask them, do you see any of the flags of your ancestral homelands or any place that you have traveled? And so luckily they put in alphabetical order, so if you're not familiar, if they throw out a name like Jamaica, you could quickly look up there and see, is it up there, and is that one of the 26 different countries he's traveled to. Some of the pictures are kind of fun to point out. I personally love this picture because it shows President Reagan in this neat shirt. He tried to kind of assimilate, he tried to honor the countries that he was going to, but it still has the presidential seal on there. So it kind of combines the two things in there. I think it's the same thing over here when he's talking with Prime Minister Nakasone. He's having tea, probably a Japanese tea house type setting, wearing the similar vest like President Nakasone is. Just point out a couple of nice things like that so kids can kind of get a feel for that. And then you could look at the flags over here. Visitors, if they ever ask, there's 3 plasma screens up there. The first one deals with his trips to Asia. The middle one deals with his trips to North, Central, and South America. And then the last one on the right deals with his trips to Europe and Soviet Union.